Einstein finished his final synoptic paper on the general theory of relativity in March 1916, and Einstein himself was deeply affected by the politics and war swirling around him. During the conflict, Einstein had faced off against most of his professorial colleagues. Back in 1914, dozens of luminaries, including the biologist Ernst Haeckel and the discoverer of X-rays Wilhelm Röntgen, had signed a manifesto to the civilized world, berating critics of the German military and defending German militarism in general and war actions in particular. Einstein, with just 2 colleagues, responded in 1915 with the Minority Manifesto of their own, lobbying for a League of Europeans and an end to this catastrophic war. To the French author Romain Rolland, Einstein lamented the idiocy of militant nationalism that was tearing apart 3 centuries of cultural achievement in Europe. Once Einstein remarked that he felt roughly the same emotional bond to the nation as he did to his life insurance company. Even scholars, he sadly remarked, had thrown their lot in with the insanity of nationalism. Einstein's wartime interventions were frequent and both public and private. When he heard of the assassination, he acted. Einstein wrote to Katja, Adler's wife, on 20 February 1917, 4 months after the shooting, 3 before the trial. "Your misfortune and that of your husband, who I have always admired, touched my heart deeply like little else that I have witnessed in this hard world. He is one of the most splendid and purest men I have ever known. I cannot judge his deed, since I cannot assess the motive behind it. I do not believe him capable of rash acts. He is much too conscientious for that. If there is something you think I can do for him or for you, think of me. Write me." Just then, Adler wrote Katja and his parents from prison about Einstein. Adler: "I am suddenly a physicist again. I have made a discovery that one would not be overestimating if one described it as the greatest possible in the current state of physics. I awoke Saturday with the solution to a small problem which has bothered me for more than a year, namely the Foucault pendulum experiment. In the course of working through the consequences of my little insight, I have arrived at a generalization of the Newtonian principles, an elementary law which up till now has simply been overlooked. It would, Adler believed, give clarity to all questions of mechanics and thermodynamics." A few days later, he wrote to say his trial had been postponed until after Easter 1917, a good thing since he was very satisfactorily plunged deep into the heart of physics. "It has unexpectedly come to pass that I have found a decisive criterion in relativity theory that rules against Mach and Einstein and for Lorentz. It puts everything in a new light." Or, as he put it in a letter to his parents, "What Mach searched for, I have found. Like all great discoveries, it was simple and full of consequences." Fritz Adler's discovery opened for him a new campaign. For Victor Adler, it also launched a second front on which he too could fight to have his son declared insane: the insanity of opposing Einstein. Adler the elder shot copies of his son's new manuscript to Einstein, to Philipp Frank, a mathematical physicist, to others, asking if the inner workings of the physics constituted prima facie evidence that could be used to show the derangement of his son. That put the physicists in a bit of a quandary, as Frank recalled a bit later. The experts, especially the physicists, were placed in a very difficult situation. Adler's father and family desired that this work should be made the basis for the opinion that Adler was mentally deranged, but this would necessarily be highly insulting to the author, since he believed he'd accomplished an excellent scientific achievement. Moreover, speaking objectively, there was nothing in any way abnormal about the manuscript, except that his arguments were wrong. Back to physics. With the return address his prison cell on the 9th of March 1917, Adler wrote to his relativistic twin Einstein: "Now that I have plenty of free time at my disposal, I have taken up my studies on the foundation of physics again, which I had abandoned 7 years ago. I started the chapter on relativity. Then something quite unexpected happened to me." Adler's philosophical work that he was trying to produce in prison on Ernst Mach's conquest of mechanical materialism, published in 1918 from prison, had two goals. First, it was a rousing defense of many of Mach's doctrines. Like Mach, Adler wanted to free physics of absolutes in space, time, motion, and mass, and replace them only with the humanly observable. According to Adler, like Marx, Mach had grounded his views on experience, materialism, and made them irreducibly historical, equivalent, said Adler, to dialectical materialism. To Einstein, Adler wrote that he'd taken Mach's views since 1903. He recalled for Einstein the arguments they'd had in the attic rooms of Moussenstrasse 12 back in Zurich. I was very irritated back then, you see, that in taking the centrifugal effects into account, you rejected relativity for rotations. So much the greater was my joy when your general theory of relativity came out. As Adler told Einstein in early February 1917, that joy was short-lived. I was in ecstasy when suddenly, 4 weeks ago, a turning point came in my considerations, which reveals the whole problem differently from how I'd seen it previously. I believe I have found where the error in the assumptions, not only by Mach, but also by you, Einstein, lies. Adler's new system, he continued, does not involve a return to absolutes, but a criterion of a relativistic nature for preferred reference systems. Here, he hoped, was the true spirit of Machism rescued from Mach's and Einstein's overextended relativism. There are three particularly interesting points about the technical criticism that Adler made. First, Adler wanted a preferred, a specially picked out reference system that went beyond the purely relative and just the merely human, and that he associated with Einstein and Mach. Second, on good Mach positivist grounds, he told Einstein that his own way did not involve the ether. No ether is intuitive like his and Einstein's old teacher Alfred Kleiner. No ether is a necessary physical hypothesis as Lorentz had wanted it, or even as a merely pragmatically useful fiction as Poincaré would have had it. Third, Adler was not interested on Machian anti-atomic grounds in the detailed structure or dynamics of the electron. Mach would have nothing to do with an electron that couldn't be seen or felt by our human senses. None of Adler's arguments moved Einstein, but Einstein engaged Adler in enormous detail. Health-wise, I am fine, Adler assured Einstein from prison, and since I have the opportunity rarely offered in life of being able to work in peace, I am completely happy, even though the time still available to me can be counted only by the week. He didn't know when he'd be hanged.